Hi, Dean. I have some questions for you, if you don't mind.
No problem, Grace.
All right. Through a Mirror Darkly by artist Naeem Mohaiemen is a 3-screen film whose title evokes Corinthians in the Bible and suggests that the total meaning of a moment changes as we move away from it and look through a mirror of memory. The 3-screen film is about 3 days in May 1970. May 4th at Kent State, May 8th at Wall Street, and May 14th at Jackson State. As a witness to Kent State, what are your first and second feelings after viewing this film?
I must say I was overwhelmed. It was like watching a newsreel of my young adult life. I remember almost every one of those newsreels that they talked about, and every one of those protests they talked about, all the student groups that they talked about. And it really brought back to my mind how violent and how much hate speech was being used by our political leaders, and how if you disagreed with government, you were worse than the dirt under their feet. And just seeing all that and then comparing that to today's environment just really emotionally grabbed me, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. It was very trying to watch this film. It's a very moving film.
The film explores how the memory of May 4th at Kent State has changed as time passes on, and in relation to other events as well. How do you personally want that day to be remembered today?
Well, I wanted to be remembered for what it was first. It was an abuse of power, starting at the local level, working its way all the way up to the White House. And I want people to remember that if you don't participate in your government, both at the local level all the way through to the national level, then you have only yourself to blame. I forget who said it, is that democracy deserves everything that it is voted for. So, when I look back and see that so few people vote, even back then, the numbers weren't staggering. And what happens is politicians can exploit that and activate groups who will get out and support them, and extremes in both sides of the issue. And the real issue, which is in the middle where most people survive, gets pushed aside, and only the extremes get emphasized. And that's not good. One of the things when I speak to groups, clubs, and organizations is that I always ask if everybody's registered to vote, show me your hands. And I said, if you're not registered to vote, the first thing you can do is get registered to vote. And then study the issues, study the candidates, study the questions, so that when you walk into the polling booth, you're able to make a decision on your experience and your research. And that's the base level. And I tell them if there's other ways to participate in your democracy. That is through clubs, groups, and organizations, social organizations. There's all kinds of groups that need volunteers, like for the MRDD board or mental disability board or whatever they call it now. There's Children's Services Board that needs local help. Working for the county or the township, if the township's big enough. There's jobs out there, and they all affect you. You may not know the effects right immediately, but they're there. And if you're going to participate in this experiment called a republic, who uses democracy to make decisions, you need to be informed. And one of the ways of getting informed is starting at the base level. And I think it's important that people know who their elected officials are, know the people who are serving on the boards and commissions that have an effect on their lives. And I encourage people in every one of my speeches that you need to do this. If you don't, you're letting somebody else make decisions for you.
The film travels beyond Ohio to England before this and Scotland this summer. what do you think these international audiences need to know about the context here in Ohio, back in 1970 and today, to better understand these histories? Imagine you're talking to someone who's never experienced life in Ohio like we both have.
Well, to address the first part of that question is, conflict is something we've been dealing with as a society, all societies, and the willingness of some leaders to be abusive and excessive. And it goes back to our previous question that you need to know what's going on. And to compare Ohio with them, the struggle continues. You know, we have similar struggles that they're having. It's just that in Ohio, at that point in time, we had a governor who was running for the U.S. Senate nomination. We had a president and a vice president who were calling students effete snobs, bums, etc., any other kinds of things. And we had state officials all over across the country ostracizing and condemning anybody who disagreed with the establishment views on things, and in particular the war in Vietnam, and prior to that, the civil rights movement. And then at the same time in 1970, you had this emerging women's movement happening. And at the same time, you had the first Earth Day. So there was all of this activism being promoted, but it was being discouraged and condemned by elected officials. And we're seeing some of that going on today as well. So you can't give up. You can't stop fighting. You have to keep working to move forward to make our society a better place to live. And that's what I would tell them to do the same in their respective countries.
Can I ask a follow-up? So you just mentioned about like the current political climate that kind of like, you know, sort of mimics what was going on, like, you know, there are connections. So can you talk a little bit about the contemporary student politics and how, you know, that's playing out?
Okay. To continue, we're dealing with politicians who are trying to control the narrative, and all politicians do. But we have a particular brand of authoritarianism floating around this country and around the world. And I just hope we learn the lessons that Hungary just learned, that population will only take so much. And so it's important to keep fighting and not allow them to overrun your beliefs and the beliefs that they believe in. I mean, most of them are pounding the Bible, but they're not acting in a godly manner. They're acting in a manner that is egalitarian, that is authoritarian, and that is exploitive for their own purposes. And we got to realize that money is not the end-all to be-all, which many of them seem to believe in. But they also believe in power. And what's the old saying? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think we're seeing that happening around the world in many places where authoritarian leaders are. You know.
And also in Ohio.
Yeah, and as well as in Ohio, yes, very much so. So, did I answer your questions?